Good evening and welcome. I am Uyai Anyekan, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. This is Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. Today on Spotlight Africa, Putin to skip BRICS summit in South Africa over arrest threat. Valerio becomes only woman running for Zimbabwe president. Ghana's plus bodyguard questioned over shooting for DR Congo politician. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. To stay with us. We begin Spotlight Africa this afternoon with a report that the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who will not attend a BRICS Nations summit in South Africa next month on the grounds of arrest threat. Now, the country's presidency today gave the warning diplomatic issue for Pretoria. The Russian leader is the target of an International Criminal Court arrest warrant, a provision that South Africa, as an ICC member, would be expected to implement if he were to set foot in the country. Now, according to reports, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will instead represent Russia. South Africa is the current and which sees itself as a counterweight to Western economic denomination. Meanwhile, Putin was formally invited to a BRICS summit due to take place in Johannesburg between August 22nd and 24th, but Pretoria has been under heavy domestic and international pressure not to host him. In a related development, South Africa's ruling African National Congress, ANC, is reportedly hosting meetings with members of political parties from Brazil, Russia, India, China is one of the main topics of discussion. According to reports, it is not clear if Russian President Vladimir Putin will attend next month's summit of the BRICS emerging economies. But South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile said in an interview that the country is trying to persuade Putin to stay away to avoid the legal and diplomatic fallout over his international arrest warrant. In another development, the only female candidate in Zimbabwe's presidential election has been added to the electoral ballot after winning an appeal barring her participation. Elizabeth Valerio successfully challenged the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission's decision to reject her nomination papers. Officials said she had failed to pay the $20,000. Earlier this month, she said that women in Zimbabwe were being denied the opportunity to participate. Meanwhile, there are now 12 candidates for the presidency, with the election being held on the 23rd of August. Moving away from that, Morocco's top court has rejected the final appeals of two journalists, Omar Radi and Solmen, 6-year prison term, and Rauseni, 51, a 5-year sentence in trials that defense lawyers labeled flawed. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch has accused Morocco of using criminal trials, especially for alleged sexual offenses, as techniques of repression to silence journalists and government could do with their profession or free speech. We move now to Ghana, where Supreme Court has dismissed an application to stop Parliament from considering a controversial anti-LGBTQ bill. In a unanimous decision on Wednesday, the court said that the applicant, an academic researcher called Dr. Amanda Odoi, failed to convince the courts to stop Parliament from continuing with the bill that was already being debated by members of Parliament. Dr. Odoi wanted debate on the bill to be put on hold until the court heard her case, which challenges the legality of the bill on the grounds that parliamentary leaders failed to do an economic impact analysis of its impact if it were for a maximum of 3 years and promoters of it imprisoned for up to 10 years. Meanwhile, it has been widely criticized as a violation of the rights of sexual minorities in the country. Meanwhile, Ghana has launched an HIV self-testing program as part of efforts to curb the spread of the virus in the country. Reports say the kit will make it possible for Ghanaians to check. Involves swabbing the upper and lower gums with an oral swab. The stick is subsequently dipped in the test tube solution for 20 minutes. A negative result will show one line on the stick, while a reactive result will show two lines. Authorities, however, say a reactive result must be confirmed at a health facility. Ghana's AIDS Commission reports that there are more than 350,000 people living with HIV in the country. However, only 71% know their status. Meanwhile, the introduction of HIV-ST has been welcomed by experts who describe it as a potential game changer in scaling up HIV testing services in Ghana. In the meantime, a member of parliament in Ghana is calling for the legislative body to investigate the activities of the US-based charity International Justice Mission, IJM, following a BBC Africa Eye expose of an anti-human trafficking. Her colleagues in parliament to reconsider the country's anti-human trafficking laws, which she says are often exploited by NGOs. While condemning IJM's activities exposed by the BBC investigation, the lawmaker expressed concern about publications that suggest there is a pervasive child trafficking in communities along Lake Volta. Elsewhere, sign language has become South Africa's 12th official language. President Cyril Ramaphosa formally appoints English, Xhosa, and Zulu. South Africa is the fourth country on the continent to recognize signing as an official language after Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Uganda. The South African National Deaf Association said the law was long overdue. It is estimated that there are 600,000 deaf people in South Africa and 1.4 million with hearing loss. Still in South Africa, authorities are concerned about a second suspected gas explosion in Johannesburg's business district after one person died and 48 were injured in a large blast on Wednesday. Videos show a main road split wide open from the force of the explosion, with several vehicles blown onto their side. Officials have pleaded with the public to stay clear of the area. It is still unclear what led to the explosion, but officials suspect an underground gas pipe is responsible. Meanwhile, emergency services are still on the scene at Bree Street, assessing the damage and evacuating people where necessary. Let's look into Kenya now, where schools have been closed in the country's two main cities as a three-day opposition protest started, with demonstrators confronting police. Tear gas has been fired in the capital Nairobi and the coastal city of Mombasa at those protesting over the high cost of living. Reports say many businesses have remained shut over fears of looting, with people scared by police. Meanwhile, human rights organizations have strongly criticized the police for what they call their excessive use of force last Wednesday. More than 50 children were admitted to hospital after tear gas was fired into their classroom in Nairobi. In a related development, leading Kenyan newspapers have called on President William Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga to consider if they want any more blood on their individual hands as the country experiences a second in clashes between Kenyan police and protesters. In a joint editorial today, the Standard Daily Nation, the Star and People Daily said Kenya stands on the precipice, I beg your pardon. It added that Ruto and Odinga have the greatest responsibility to put out the fire before it spreads out of control. Wagner Group chief says activities to continue in Africa. Stay tuned for details of this and more after this time out. Thanks for staying tuned. Out dead last week in Kinshasa is being questioned by police. The former transport minister Cherubin Okende was found dead in his car. Attorney General Fabian Bonde, according to reports, he was a spokesman for the opposition party who was due to contest the presidential election scheduled for December. In Burkina Faso, in the next few months, 2 million people, 1 in 10 of the population, are experiencing hunger. But the IRC says that the figure could reach 3.3 million by September. As a result of a militant Islamic insurgency, parts of the country are almost entirely cut off of people in the northern town of Djibo, which hosts more than 200,000 people, stolen and killed for food from the Sudan Animal Rescue Sanctuary. The founder has told newsmen, blaming fighters from the Rapid Support Forces RSF. The RSF is one side of a civil war that is currently raging in Sudan. Now, according to reports, 4 gazelles were shot on 2 separate occasions, as well as 1 camel on a 3rd occasion. The sanctuary added that the RSF fighters are also threatening to return to steal more animals. Endangered species. Elsewhere, Chinese President Xi Jinping has held China's relationship with Algeria in a meeting for 65 years, have shared will and war, helped each other, and the friendship between the two countries has been strengthened over time. Reports say the meeting takes place a month before the BRICS summit in South Africa. According to reports, since 2014, Algeria and China have been strategic partners and have pledged to expand their cooperation in the economy, trade, energy, space, and health sectors. Away from that, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi granted a pardon today to researcher Patrick Zaki, a day after Zaki's 3-year jail term sparked an outcry from local rights groups and Western governments. His sentence on Tuesday for spreading false news had prompted some participants to walk out of a government dialogue aimed at giving the opposition a voice. Zaki, 32, was jailed over an article recounting the discrimination he and other members also granted a presidential pardon to Mohammed al-Bakr, the lawyer for Allah Abdel Fattah, Egypt's best-known political prisoner. Word of the pardon came after the U.S. State Department had said on Twitter it was. In Namibia, lawmakers have approved legislation to ban same-sex marriage and punish its supporters in what critics say was an unconstitutional attack from unions contracted abroad. The legislation sailed through the upper house of parliament and espoused as one half of a legal union between a genetically born man and genetically born woman. It states that same-sex marriages in the region of Gambale have imposed a nighttime curfew after scores were killed in fresh violence. The curfew prohibits movement between 7 o'clock and 6 a.m. The regional guard, it said, were involved in the disturbance of peace. Now, according to local media, the violence began earlier this week and has had ethnic dimensions, with at least 2 areas witnessing clashes. Sources in the regional capital Gambela City said businesses and officers. In May, at least 7 were reportedly killed and more than a dozen wounded in clashes in Gambela City. Last year, the city was raided by the founder of Russia's private military company Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has told newsmen that his mercenaries will be in Africa. His remarks followed rumors about the possible withdrawal of Wagner mercenaries from Mali and the Central African Republic. The rumors began circulating after Prigozhin staged a short-lived mutiny in Russia on the 24th of June. Meanwhile, rights groups have accused Wagner mercenaries of committing human rights abuses in Mali and the CAR. Super Team 4. The 8-part series is set in a futuristic version of Lusaka, Zambia's capital, and tells the story of 4 female teenage superheroes who are on a mission to save their city. Malenga stories to be told on the platform like Netflix. And that's all we have for you at this time. This has been Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng, and also on planetradio.ng. My name is